Shaolin, now all I touch, I am a master here.
Okay, so this is something we've been waiting to do for a very long time. This happens to be this guy sat on the screen in his designer studio. This is Matt Terry, famous record producer extraordinaire. Matt basically brought us out of a very deep hole, didn't he, Ryan? And yeah, so we thought we'd get Matt on to talk about basically his story, because he talks to us about it all the time and it's been very inspirational to us. So we're just going to ask him some questions, get his stories out, and hopefully maybe you'll can learn a few things off him, which we have, because he's our mentor, Matt Terry, Shaolin master. So yeah, that's the intro.
That's a nice intro.
Welcome to the Shaolin series.
Yes.
Shaolin show.
Nice to be here. It's really nice to be invited. This is my my big night out.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah, happy birthday, Matt.
Thank you.
Makes it extra special, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, it's National Matt Terry Day.
The second one of the year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Matt, kick it off then, mate. Tell us who you are, where you are in the world, and what you're doing.
Well, I am Matt Terry. I am a producer, and I also do a bit of songwriting from time to time. I'm currently sat in my studio in Worcestershire with no bands in it whatsoever. No real sort of musical life other than the stuff that I've just been sort of pottering with in lockdown. And yeah, it's kind of strange. The first couple of weeks, it was nice to sort of go, oh, this is what this place is like without bands. This is quite nice. And then after 2 weeks, it was like, nah, shit without bands. So I'm quite eager for some bands to come back for that. Yeah. I can't think of any other ways of describing myself.
We'll get to that, Matt. 100% get to that.
The reason I'm here is because of I was saying to Sid earlier, we've known each other for 5 years now.
Wow, is it that long?
So yeah, our story started in 2015 with Cupids.
It did, yeah.
And the session that after you left, I thought you hated me. You would never want to work with me again.
We did. We had no one else to go to. So we came back. No, from that session, it's funny you brought that up. And it was 5 years, which is surprising, because that's gone really quick and really long. So get your head around that. But yeah, I remember at that session, you brought me out my shell a little bit, which was one of the main reasons. I think me and Ryan had the discussion at the time to go back to your studio. You know, once we got our tunes together and stuff like that, it was like, it wasn't really a question of who else there was going to be. It was just basically, it was going to be Matt Terry. So that was the experience we had the first time. We loved it. I'd never had an experience in the studio like it until I came to your place.
I remember at the time, afterwards, I felt it had sort of gone wrong on me a little bit, because I remember it sort of coming to the table and the band, great, but I remember the management saying, this great, but there's just something grinding internally. There's this sort of energy that never quite has the synergy, and you need to try and pull this all into one. And I was like, okay, let's give that a go. And I heard the demos and I was like, yeah, I'm really up for this. And then giving everybody, I remember sort of trying to kind of pull more James, make more James, if you sort of mean. And then, you know, and when I did all that and pulled all of you to be exactly who you probably really were as musicians, it's kind of like, oh God, these guys shouldn't be in a band together like this. You know what I mean? And it became really obvious. And it was kind of like, oh, right. So through me trying to repair this, what I've done is I've accentuated the fact that this isn't where all of the band want to be, where this band is currently going. And it was a really interesting one for me, because I at the end of it, I was sort of like, okay, well, I did do my job and I did pull a lot of things round, but it was kind of, I thought, oh God, have I just destroyed a really good band in a way? And then, And then, well, it was interesting because then I heard that the band ended, and then I got that email that Christmas time from you guys, which I thought was a joke because I thought you hated me. And then saying like, oh, can we send you some demos? And I remember hearing the demos and totally loving them, like within the first 8 bars, just totally got it and just went, this is really exciting. And then it was that moment, like two and a bit years later, they went, this is what it was supposed to be. And I hadn't quite sort of spotted, but I could see like you, James and Ryan, there was this like synergy, everything was working together. And then your vocal concept was so much more kind of to where you should be, do you know what I mean? And it just became glaringly obvious how the three of you should be existing in a band. And it was just like, oh yeah, okay. And it was almost like, okay, I get a second chance at this now. But it's, but it was almost like, when you're in a relationship with the wrong girl. And I think that was kind of what it was all about in that situation. Because there was Cupids were a great band, but there was just, I think people, and if you listen to Cupids and you listen to Jake's writing now and his new album, it's just like, I had to listen to that the other day. It's really cool.
That's what I mean, yeah.
You listen to that and then you listen to LOA and go, hey, guess what? Those guys used to be in a band together. People go, fuck off. Do you know what I mean?
That's become apparent, and actually, I put a post up the day, and me and Jake started speaking together. He messaged me again, which was nice. And it was like it was very like that. I think we've grown apart. It just inspiration really, because we were so together at the start with what we were writing about.
Yeah.
And then I think it just dispersed apart. And then it became around that time when we came to you, was kind of at a time where I don't think any of us kind of knew what we wanted at that time. Obviously, you could kind of tell because there was a mismatch, but it was just literally, I think it was just me and Jake wanting to write different songs, maybe. I don't know. How did you find it, Ryan?
I mean, I think it was so obviously that, because, I mean, you're so vehemently different songwriters, and yet you're so, like, creative and highly prolific. So it's sort of, the more I learned about both of you, and then obviously as time has gone on and that amazing thing called hindsight, I just go, God, how did they exist in a band together as they did? But obviously there was that younger thing when you start off and you evolve, and that's the thing musically, you never should stop evolving, ever. It's always about evolution, and you shouldn't ever question that evolution, sometimes just because, and in bands, I always think that, sometimes it's sad because, you have to stop hanging out with those people as much as you used to in rehearsal rooms and studios and stuff, because you're not going to be in the band with them anymore. But it's it is just like having that girlfriend that you just, you kind of don't want to leave, but at the same time, you're not actually having sex anymore. So it's
Well, it wasn't. It was Ryan who put an end to it, really, because I think I would have just. I thought, because me and Jake had so much, I thought this can't fail. You know what I mean? And then, but we were hearing it so many times from people just saying something's not clicking. But that's where we're at with that. But I'm glad you've seen it now, because you've heard Jake's stuff as well, which it's completely different than what I'm doing. But at the same time, it's Jake, and then it's like our stuff on this side, and it's kind of like, maybe that was it.
Yeah, I think
thinking about it.
Yeah.
I think what I would say on that whole point was what I've just taken from listening to you guys for the past like 5 minutes was Matt picked up all of that from the 2-day session that we had with Cupids. And that just goes to show how incredible your sort of intuition is and the reading of a situation. And that's something that I just totally admire in you as a person and as a producer as well. It's just how you can pick so much up from very little. And that's something that I think both me and Sid definitely admire in you. And that's something that we were drawn to with the way you were working. So, yeah, 100%. When the choice was like, who we're going to go with for this sort of stuff. And I suppose we've spoke, Sid, about, our early days, and we were just finding our feet with sounds, and it was a massive grey area for us. We'd never done that before, and what we really needed to do was learn as quickly as possible on the job. And there was only one man for that, and that was Matt Terry. So,
Matt, now we spoke about ourselves far too much, which we said that this wasn't going to happen. We're going to be talking about you. How did it start for you? How did you start producing, and why producing, or was it bands first?
Yeah. The usual route of, you know, I think did my first gig in a band, terrible band, when I was 15, and then did that and did bands. I did bands all my life up until about 8 years ago. And I did, you know, and I enjoyed it a lot. But the one thing I realized is that the huge advantage of being in bands all the time for such a long period of time was that I kind of understand what it's like to be the other side of the glass. I understand what it's like to be in the band. I understand what it's like to be in the back of a splitter bus. I understand what it's like to be in a touring situation when you don't feel very happy with the band and you don't like everybody in the band, or you don't, you know what I mean? I've been in those situations when you, the band, are all feeling at one, and then you've got people on the administration side, such as management or labels, feeling like they're all against you and all that sort of thing. So I think I'm fortunate that I have that aspect of spending a lot of time in the band side of it. It was weird because the band thing was probably the main aspiration to start with, I guess, like most people. And then I started the studio. I started Vada Studios when I was 21, which now makes me laugh because
21 years old. You started studios. What was that? What was the first studio like? What was in there? Where was it?
Oh, bless it. It was well, for a start, it was before the computer age had really kicked in, and ADAT was the digital age. That's what everybody was using. Alanis Morissette, Jagged Little Pill had just been done on ADAT actually at the time, and I think that's one of the reasons everybody's like, oh, it's the future. And it was in a rented, like, industrial estate in this old cold storage. So even like the drummer in the summer used to have to keep his coat on to do drum takes. It was permanently freezing cold. The acoustics were fucking awful. It was just a shed, and I had a Mackie. I think it was a 32-8 or a 24-8. I think it was a 32-8. I bought it second hand, and I loved that console. I had it for years. It was such a good desk for what it was, and all my outboard was Behringer.
Classy.
Yeah. The Behringer Composer compressors, I lived off those for years. And then and I moved around. I was based in Stratford-upon-Avon, and Vada was always kind of in Stratford-upon-Avon. And then I had this I had this one landlord that throughout the whole time, he wasn't my favourite person in the world, but landlords aren't supposed to be, are they? And
right to landlord. Right to landlord, aren't you?
To a degree.
To a degree.
But no, and he would sort of like, I'd have my studio set up in one of his buildings, and then he'd decide that he wants something else in that building. It's like, oh, I'm gonna have to move you, and he just kept moving me around, but he did sort of every time kind of got me into better spaces, and it sort of developed slowly over time. So I was recording loads of stuff and different stuff, and started pulling a lot of a load of metal in around 2002 time, you know, when Limp Bizkit were killing it, and
Yes.
and it was just everybody wanted the Deftones snare, the Terry Date snare, and I was just doing kind of like just all the Birmingham metal bands, and that's when I started working with Luke Johnson, who's an incredible drummer, and I worked with him in so many different bands over the years. We had so many great times together. And he lives in America now. I haven't seen him for ages. I really want to work with him again. We've been sort of flirting with each other on that prospect on social media. But he kind of, because he was in loads of bands as well, and he was quite well known on the scene, he just told the whole of Birmingham to come and work with me all the time. And I got loads of practice in, and the studio got really, really busy, and I was always working. So I was really developing my craft. And then it was through, funny enough, it was a band that he was in called Harpies, who are awesome band. They were like metal with two girl singers going, and yeah, they were cool as fuck. And that was the very first time I ever heard my work played on Radio 1 on the Marianne Hobbs show. And I remember being sort of slightly disappointed because there was a couple of phase issues on that recording. It was like, oh, I can't hear certain things on the radio. But I was only a little pup and I was still learning.
So how old were you there, Matt, at that point? When was this?
What, with regards to phase issues on stuff on Radio 1, old enough to know better? I think I was probably about 25, 26, I guess.
Wow. And the metal sort of attraction, I suppose, was that your sort of line of preferred music anyway, or was that something that was just happening, you had to just take on and adjust to it?
No, I've always been really eclectic, and I think my parents were a lot to do with that. They were my dad used to love music, so both my parents love music, and they always played music all the time. And so there was a hardcore backbone of what you'd expect, like ABBA, and that's the classic pop of that time, mainly in my mum's car, I guess. And then my dad would play things like he was hugely into Led Zeppelin. So that's kind of where the sort of rock taste sort of came from. But then in the 80s, my dad really embraced electronic music, which, looking at his 70s music taste, looking back on that, it's kind of like, whoa, okay. I'm quite surprised he did, but he got really into it. And he got me into loads of bands. Like he bought Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Welcome to Pleasure Dome. And I remember studying that record and just going, fuck, okay, there are records, and then there's like,
yeah, that was a great record, great album.
It was this pantomime of production that just blew my mind. It wasn't a record, it was a world. And I was too young to kind of get all the sexy connotations. It's really funny, it's like I didn't see any of it. I didn't know what coming meant. When you want to come out, oh, where was he trying to go to? And it was cool because I just listened to it as this, as I said, this kind of like music pantomime. And then it was quite interesting musically in terms of that influence. In my sort of teens, when I started getting into bands, I wanted to be in guitar bands and doing all that because I was very much an indie boy, I guess, at that point as well. And that was the kind of bands that I chose to play in, partly because you didn't have to be as good a musician to be in an indie band as you did in a metal band. And I remember it was a time that rave was kicking in, and all these venues that as a kid, you'd read about, and now I got my demo tape and we was set time to send it off to these venues and go, oh, we'd like to play there, please. It was that time when it was just this perpetual, sorry, mate, don't do bands anymore, just DJs. And it was like, I hate you, rave music. And I really, really, really fought against it because I just thought, oh my God, they're ruining my precious rock and roll. And all the electronic stuff that I'd liked as a kid, and like Yellow, my dad got me into Yellow, oh yeah. And I just went, right, that's it, I'm never listening to anything with computers. And then when I was it was 17, I heard Charlie by The Prodigy, which completely changed my life. And then I got really into The Prodigy.
This is Enter the Mats area that we know, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and then, but it's interesting because if you think about The Prodigy then and the records, how they drew me in, they always had this sort of, maybe this punk ethos, and this even when they were seemingly traditionally rave, in the first record on The Experience and things like that. If you listen to the song structures and the energy and the dynamic and the way it was, they became a lot more obviously that way inclined towards the latter part of their career, especially obviously having a guitarist featured on stage and stuff. But if you listen to the early stuff, it still had that there. And it's funny because I really was not prepared. I didn't want to look like a band with any synths in. You know what I mean? Right. Anything with an 808 could fuck right off. Like, not on my watch. And Charlie had me. It just had me. I couldn't stop listening to it. And then that formulated all the electronica stuff that I got really into. And then that just oh God, I could talk for hours about that. But I'm really choosy about the electronica. And then with regards to you guys, the one thing that really turned me on from the very first demos was that there was a spirit of it and a vibe of it, which tweaked my fancy for the same reason that I loved a band called the Cooper Temple Claws.
Yeah. That was it. Yeah, I remember that.
And I said at the time, it's like, you're very different, but there was just this thing. And then again, that's why, cut to the now, and that's why I know, you know, the record that we did was mixed by Dan Austin, who obviously mixed and produced all the Cubitemporal stuff. And there's this sort of, there's that energy. So that kind of was really exciting. So with regards to the indie sensibility and then all the electronica sort of stuff, everything that you did, I just loved musically as a fanboy. I was really into it. And then the interesting thing that I found was a bit different was that there was like the story behind it. There was this structure. There was this, you know, the piece Love Anarchy, but it was all like, it wasn't pretentious art. It wasn't a wanky art piece. It was all really well thought out and really relevant and a really cool creative challenge.
Sorry, Matt, we spoke a lot about that, haven't we? How it can very easily go up its own arse a little bit, become self-indulgent and stuff like that. So I think just through conversations, we've been able to put borders around it, kind of, and just like still let it grow and stuff like that, because there is a message there, and there's been a message there since day one. But it's just been kind of dragging that out of the music, and then I suppose just developing our whole ethos, the way we work and stuff like that has just come out of this message and everything. It's you've watched it grow. You've watched it grow from the start, really.
Yeah, I mean the sort of scary thing about the subject matter of the band stuff creatively is that now in the world that we're living in, it's almost like the songs have almost become slightly a prophecy, which is sort of quite scary in a way. And I think it's an interesting way now looking at it creatively. I look at the songs differently now because of the way what's happened, you know, and I think people will listen to the songs differently. If this hadn't happened, it would have been perceived slightly differently. Whereas I think actually more people will get it, even more people, because a lot of people would be like, oh, well, that sort of world doesn't bother me, you know, this utopian thing, and there's potentially a removal of our norm in many scenarios.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, and I'm as guilty as the next person, you live in this technological arrogance of like, it's 2020, nothing can harm me.
It's true, man. It is.
I mean, I still can get my Amazon deliveries, but apart from that, the
No,
world has stopped.
still do my yoga in the garden.
Gotta get my yoga in.
But yeah, no, I completely get that, man.
It's been.
To be fair, sorry, Ryan, go on.
I was just gonna say, yeah, it is scary how kind of prophetic it's become.
It has.
You know,
for me, part of it all, because it's grown since. It's not just been like we had the full idea from day one. It was there was something there, and we've just developed that from every time we've been down there and stuff like that. But for us, I know from us talking about it that it's because of the base of the studio that we go to, because literally there's magic there, and it's kind of like. It's a retreat. It's more like, this is where all the Shaolin stuff came from, because it's like that disappearing into, like, going into the woods and being, you know, in stories where they disappear and they go into the unknown bit, and it's kind of like you're away from everything where you do your training and all that kind of stuff that's in films. The whole place just feels like that kind of retreat, where you're allowed to just be yourself.
Well, I think what would be a really good thing to do now, actually, is to speak to Matt about the studio. And a studio as it is now, and then kind of tell us how you kind of set that up, your vision of it, and where you are with that vision now, Matt. It'd be really, really interesting to hear about that.
It's weird. It was never a vision as such, and again, it was kind of how the band was created. I had this general idea that I wanted to have a really cool studio, you know, like anybody would. And again, over time, you know, I mean, this console is my dream console that I wanted since I was like 16, the SSLG series. Never really thought I'd own one because it was just like ridiculous at the time.
It's not green screened in, that, is it?
Yeah. I had to do it. And that, you know, I had lots of different consoles, and through the years, and each time it gets a bit better and a bit better and a bit better. And then when I got to the position of getting Vada to here, it was just like, okay, then I'm now building a residential studio that's going to sort of compete with the big boys, the big end of the scale. So the way I approach everything actually is just, if you're going to do that, then be individual, because chances are, you know, there's lots of people already, you know, we've got lots of those sorts of studios and we've got lots of those sorts of records. So what's the point of doing another one? And I really like old places. I as a kid, I used to, it's funny because obviously the internet didn't exist in the 70s, and one of my favorite studios to ever read about and geek out about, it's quite difficult to find information, and that's the Manor, which was owned by Richard Branson, which is where Tubular Bells was recorded. And amongst many other records, and unfortunately it doesn't exist now. The funny thing is about that is that the guy that did all the planning applications and got the planning through when EMI sold it as a studio, and then the person that bought it wanted to did turn it into flats. The guy that did all the planning for that and cleared all that through, the architect, is the guy that did all the planning and put all the stuff through for Vada Studios to turn into a recording studio.
No way! I didn't know that, man.
I kind of joked about with him about that, but because he'd sort of undone his wrong. Yeah. So anyway, that studio was a very sort of characterful studio in an old manor house in Oxfordshire. I think one of the last albums to be recorded there was one of the Paul Weller. I think it was a Paul Weller record. I might be mistaken. It just appeared to have such a vibe, and it was not. It was like a studio within, you know, not in a purpose-built studio environment. And I've worked in some amazing studios, and some studios are very much purpose-built, and they are literally a studio, and that's all cool. But for me, I wanted something that was a bit more vibey, and a bit more, I don't know. I always wanted to live in a house that all the kids in the village were too scared to come up and knock on the door.
That's right. That is right. 100%.
And so this sort of place fit the bill, and then and then the studio vision, I guess, after seeing this building and, you know, seeing the chapel and just going, oh God, if Carlsberg made studios, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Was it very?
There's basically the way you record all your live instrumentation, stuff like that, is basically over there behind that green screen is a 13th century chapel in it that's attached to the manor house, the scary house.
And so that dictated the vision for the studio in a way. And it's if Georgians made recording studios, that's what I say about it. So it's a bit crazy, but it's great, and I'm really proud of it. I love working in it, and then the rest of the vision is, you know, just keeping it as it's a weird thing, a residential recording studio, because it's not just the studio, it's the residential part and the living quarters, and you just got to make sure people are happy and they feel comfortable here, you know. And I've only been residential in the whole studio's life. The studio only went residential in 2013, so I've only been the Basil Fawlty of the music industry for 7 years.
Well, that's again a massive selling point for us that we loved, because you live and breathe the studio when you're there, because you don't go home. Well, we don't. You don't. You literally, you're recording and that's it. The conversations, you're facing the studio in the residential bit anyway, so you're seeing it. You're waking up, you have a brew, you do whatever you're doing, and then you go straight into the studio, just like a literally 50-yard walk across the way. And then it's literally, you leave and go on for your tea. It's back and forth, and it's home in it for however long you're there. It's great.
But it's not oppressive, you know. I think it's
no.
When you're making records, you can be too intense, and it can just become a bit of a head fuck, and then you start losing the focus and losing perspective, and your judgment starts going a bit like, ooh, you know, those things when you come in the morning and open up an arrange page of what you were doing last night, and then go, yeah, this isn't great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes you know, it's better to be able to just have the right balance of space, but still feel like you're working. You know, so I've seen you go over there just to go and write lyrics and stuff. You're still around, but you're sitting by the lake, so you're kind of getting a chill one,
Yeah.
but at the same time you're still working, and then I can just go outside and go, "Oi, Sid, come back in here."
Do you know what? It's interesting.
Basically how it is.
I was watching. I can't remember what I was watching. I think it was the Star Wars documentary, and it was about where Lucas first started out, and he was bringing loads of writers and creatives to a specific place, like in a house somewhere, and it was a retreat. I know you mentioned that earlier, Sid, about it being a retreat, but you hear about people like writers for shows going on a retreat for a week, and they ate together. They were doing stuff together during the day. They were drinking at night, and then I kind of get the same vibe at the studio, because basically it is a retreat for us. We come and see Matt. We discuss certain things. It's all about the music that week. We have creative conversations about music, about art. We learn stuff from Matt.
You do away with the dining area and turn it into a secondary studio.
Well, your studio, where your studio can't really do certain things, our studio does.
That's our place, isn't it? It is.
So Matt, tell us a little bit more about why you like the desk behind you.
He hates it, really. He hates it. Look at him.
I like it because I love the SSL mic pre-sound. I love the EQ. I find it very instinctive. It's I learned more on an SSL than Neve in my early days, so I'm more comfortable with an SSL. It's highly versatile.
What albums have been made on an SSL like that, that people might be able to relate to?
Loads. The reason I wanted an SSL and I fell in love with it was I fell in love with a record called Disintegration by The Cure, and that was done on the SSL at a studio called Rack Studios in London. And there's a sound to that, and I remember reading about it and people going, "Oh, that's a it sounds really SSL." And I remember going, "Well, I really like the sound of this record, so that's SSL." So yeah, I mean, I like Neve as well. I've got a load of Neve channels in the rack over there.
I remember you talking to us about how a lot of hip hop producers favour.
Yeah, I remember being really happy when I saw that the Dre movie, and they'd got it absolutely, like everything in the studios they'd got absolutely bang on. Like all the consoles were SSL.
Straight out of Compton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eminem has an SSL console because Old Boy George, not my engineer George, but Old Boy, I shouldn't call him Old Boy George, but he's in his 70s. He's a legend. George Gilbert, he's the man that maintains this desk, Gertie. And he also occasionally gets flown over to America by Eminem to go and service his desk.
It's a great story.
Yeah, I remember. I told you, didn't I? When he told me he went over to go and fix the desk, and Eminem's engineer said, "Oh, you're going to need a couple of days to fix it." And George's like, "No, I can do that in half a day." And I said, "Did you manage to fix it in half a day?" He goes, "Oh yes, it was quite straightforward." I said, "Oh, did you go and do a bit of sightseeing on the extra day?" He goes, "No. Eminem was really cool. He let me hang out and watch him spit rhymes."
Yeah, man, it's a great story. Like, I'm not imagine not many people have seen that either, have they? You know what I mean? So
No,
crazy.
but
Crazy.
yeah, I mean the SSL console is. I know. Again, going back to the Prodigy, they've. I don't know about recently, but certainly Fat of the Land and I think Music for Jilted Generation were mixed on SSL, and that sort of punch, that brightness, even though you've got that real big low end and stuff, that's quite a you can to me I can always hear that SSL in Prodigy records. It's probably another reason I like it. It's my taste. It's a taste thing.
Yeah.
It responds to that sound, and I kind of, when I hear it in other records, it's like, like when you smell a nice stew, it's like,
So what about some of your close producer friends who come through the door? What do they like most about your setup where you are?
That they can show off that they've got Grammys and I haven't.
Not yet.
Not yet.
No, not all of them have Grammys.
You said that so flippantly. Not all of them have Grammys.
But yeah, it's I mean, people, you know, some of the well-known producer friends that come through here. I mean, the two that I can think of immediately are Dan Austin and Adrian Bushby. Both are affiliated to SSL consoles. Both like SSL consoles. You know, that's their thing. That's their sound. Dan Austin spent all of his formative years working at Bath Moles, which had an SSL console, and then Adrian Bushby, especially in the era, you know, through the 90s and stuff, he spent a lot of time on SSLs. He's got a baby one of these in his shed, which actually when he came to work here like the second time, he was freaking out. He was just like, oh, fucking hell, I can't not work with one of these anymore. Fucking hell, I'm going to have to buy, bollocks. And he went and bought like a I think it's got 16 channels in it. It's cool as fuck. He's modified it because he's a massive Star Wars geek as well. And he's like, some of these panels he's taken out and he's replaced them with glass, and he's put like Star Wars like Alliance decals on, and it got lights uplighting them from inside. And he's changed the SSL, and the SSL bit on the console is in the Star Wars typeface. It's amazing.
Genius.
I don't often have console envy, but Adrian Bushby's SSL console does sort of make me go, oh, I want to pimp Gertie a little bit, but
Gertie, that's the name, isn't it?
But yeah, I bought this, and it came from Denmark, and I bought it as it's now a 56 frame. I bought it as a 40, and I just kept adding bits to it. The last 8 I didn't intend to. It's what's known as the Orange EQ, which is like based on the Pultec. They're a bit warmer than the rest of the console EQs, and it's just 8 channels that are different to the rest. And they came up. They were in America, these 6 channels, and they were with the VCA faders, the actual fader parts as well. So you got the whole fader channel all the way down. And they were really cheap. I can't remember. I mean, they weren't cheap because they're not cheap, but the 8 it was a bargain. And then I spoke to the people that knew about it, and they said, yeah, they're in really good nick. This is actually as good as it is supposed to be. So I bought them, and I didn't really have the money to buy them. And then I'd forgotten the fact that once I bought the channels, it then cost loads of money to extend the console, have George make a new loom to then wire it in. And I think I got the bucket extended first, put the channels in, and then it was a bit embarrassing because there was a period of time when producers would be here and they'd go, oh yeah, so what's that? Is that a different bay of 8? And I'm like, yeah, they don't turn on. And they were just like dummies for like a year and a half till I could afford to actually get all the looms made and then put them in. So, and that was it then. It's like, right, stop the SSL addiction. 56 channels in this day and age is more than enough.
That's where you're at.
Amazing.
So,
but both, you know, myself, Dan Austin, and Adrian Bushby on any album session, we will use every fucking channel without fail.
Yeah. You might as well if you got it.
Well, on LOA sessions,
You need to bring in another desk.
yeah, pretty much all of the right-hand side, apart from the last 8, is James.
He's tall though, isn't he?
13 arms tall. 13 arms.
We start adding things to his drum kit and make new drum kits and little mini drum kits and whatnot.
Did you know, so as soon as we came into the studio, Matt, sorry to go off topic in that, but did you know what you were going to do with us, or was it kind of figuring it out where we were up to again and stuff? Or
The very, very, very first sessions.
Yeah, if you can remember.
Oh, yeah, I can remember those well.
I wonder, because it's like, because you obviously you produced us, so I wonder what your process is when, especially, I knew you knew us already, but like if we're coming in, what's kind of your process? We were chatting a lot beforehand, to be fair, weren't we?
Yeah, and it was also discussed that it was very much early days and that there was loads of room for development, and my input was being like really welcomed, not just sort of, oh, if you want to have a few suggestions. It was, you know, and so that was kind of really fun. And the nice thing is about that first session is that some of it got used on the record.
Yeah, we came in with Love As You Want It, which was the first track we actually put out as well. And it was like a demo that we sent over to Matt, and it was a conscious decision that we want Matt to have complete input as equal to us, you know, if not more. You know, that is a conscious decision that we made. You know, there's no barriers with this. we don't know what to do with it. We don't know what direction we're going in. Join the train, if you know what I mean. Jump on the train with us.
But if you think about it, on the very first session, it was totally. Well, Denny was the bass player.
Oh God, he was, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
And then it was like,
Thunder bass.
and then it was just like, okay, so what's Ryan doing? And I remember thinking, because Ryan's a fucking great bass player, and Denny was like, and Denny was like, well, I'm the bass player because Ryan's told me I have to be.
Ryan had a little space station.
Denny, it's like, Denny, do you want to be the bass player? He goes, not really. And I'm like, okay. And then everybody's going, yeah, Denny's got a great voice. He's got a fucking great voice. I'm like, what's he doing with the bass then? And then I was like, right, so what are you doing, Ryan? Oh, well, I'm just doing computer stuff. I'm not really going to play in this band. I'm like, well, you're a fucking great player. What are you doing? And then Tommy was just sort of doing guitar-y bits, sort of.
Yeah, Tommy just dropped the drums.
Yeah, and he was sort of going, yeah, I've kind of got a few ideas. I'm just adding a few textures and layers. And then there was another guy in the band. So as well, on top of that, you were a 6-piece. So now if you know, the evolution, it's like, right, well, firstly, 2 of them are in completely different job roles. 3 of them.
Yeah.
It's only Sid and James that do the same thing in the first session. So
that first session, we did Love As You Want It. That first, I think it was a 2 or 3 day session. I came out of it and I didn't play anything. literally didn't record anything. I think I might have did a few vocals.
You've had a really nice holiday, haven't you? You had a really nice time.
I was just, and then like you say, yeah, roles have reversed. Like Tom has completely, you know, took over that role of producer as well. You know, the sounds that he's making. Yeah, and it's weird, and I've gone on to bass, but yeah, it was interesting that. It's really weird to reflect on how much we have changed actually since that point.
Well, I forgot about all that, man. That's so funny.
I was going through some phone footage for that thing we were talking about the other day, and I found photos of the very first session with LOA, and it's Denny looking scared holding a bass.
Yeah, he did, man. He didn't like that at all, and I was worried. I was worried.
And it's like, listen, you got a really good voice. What do you want to sing? Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, Yorkshire tonage.
To be fair though, that's one of the challenges. You know, in LOAstate, we've got James and Tom who both play drums exceptionally well. Tom plays bass as well as that and guitar. Sid plays guitar. I play guitar. We all sing. It's like that was the issue. It was like, yeah, we can all do something. It was just kind of like, right, what are we doing?
But this leads me on to the question that I asked though, because literally, I think we would have carried on going all over the fucking place. Sorry to swear in that, but we would have carried on going all over the place. I think having you there, like, it's always been that kind of you're in the band, you know that you're in the band, Matt, but it's like you've always had that, like, just the person that's just outside, just viewing it from the outside. And we spoke about this the other night, didn't we? And it's kind of like you can see this is your producer role, or what you took up, or how we see a mentor, whatever you want to call it. But it was just kind of like you could see what was working, what wasn't. So we got rid of what wasn't working straight away. Because, like you said, we were so up for listening and so up for learning. That was the whole part of it. We didn't want to be telling you what we wanted. We wanted to be growing together. And you just kind of said, that's kind of what a producer does, isn't it? It kind of manages the session, but keeps the spirit high, but kind of gives as much advice and constructive feedback as possible, really, isn't it? It's
got to be a real coherent synergy, and that's why we work so well together, because we do have a really good relationship, and it's got to be a two-way trust thing. So, you know, I'm not a producer that does the whole, it's my way or the highway. You know, I mean, I know horror stories. Like, there's bands that I've worked with that have worked with some very big names, right? And they've literally been working with said big name, and big name has said, guys, I want you to play the guitars all tuned out of tune or something like, you know what I mean? And the band have gone, no, we're really not vibing that. We're really not vibing that. And this, whatever big producer has literally turned around to said band and gone, listen, I'm the guy that produced a very, very big record that everybody knows in the entire world and that's sold millions. And then sits back and goes, right, so now do my fucking idea. And it's like, whoa, this happens, you know? And, you know, there are producers out there that take points on the record that they're producing, but then they take points on the record after the one that they produced, regardless who's producing it, because their whole theory is like, well, that record's bound to do well because you've done a record with me, and the next record will only do well because of the record you've done with me. So I get points on a few more of your records.
Can you just explain points, Matt?
Points are like a very convoluted way of royalties that producers get on records. Yeah, there is quite there's kind of the power producer and the boisterous one and things like that. Whereas I'm not like that. I have ideas, and if I have a really strong idea, what I try to do is I try to get the band to understand it and like it. I remember the very first time that I was when I was a kid, and it was the first little record deal I had with this indie label, and we were put with a producer. The first time I was put with a producer, and he hacked our song apart, right? And he was like, "Well, that's too long. Get rid of that. You know why? You know the classic why 8 bars when you can have 4." And I remember sitting there, and the song that he was hacking apart was the song that the demo that got us this little single deal on this little indie label thing. And I remember going, well, why do I have to change this song? It must have been fine the way it is, because we wouldn't have got this deal otherwise, right?
Yeah.
Little Matt Terry, bless him, so cute.
Little,
yeah,
don't act like you've changed. Do not act like you've changed at all.
and it's kind of funny, but then I remember not enjoying that situation because for whatever reason it wasn't working. He was coming across in a way that was making me think, But I remember the very first time that I was working with a producer and he hacked into one of my songs and he just went, well, listen, why don't we do this, and then do that and that? And I'm thinking that and that. And I literally sat there and went, why didn't I think of that? That's you've just made that 10 times better. And I see why and how you've done it. And I can't believe I didn't think of that. And then I ran with it a little bit more. So my whole thing with bands is that I like to try and feed them into that corner of epiphany, and then they run with it, and then I get all that creativity because there's only so much I create. You know what I mean?
Just little flashes of insight in it here and there.
Yeah.
You kind of, if the ship's kind of going off course, you kind of just nudge it back in.
I don't like a course too much. I always try to identify what I've got, like what talents I've got. And again, with this band, like you explained, there's a lot of multi-talented people here. So people can talk about a lot of different angles. You know, I can talk to James, I can talk to Tommy, you know, about detailed drums and rhythmical side of things. There's 2 brains on the rhythmical element there, which is really cool. And they're both very intelligent and they work with each other and stuff. And I've realized that. So, you know, working with that, sometimes, you know, I've often, you know, it's like, okay, you're right. I like what James is doing. That's really cool. We should have the simplicity there, but there's a hole, isn't there? Can you hear how there's something there that's just, it's not quite where we want it. And they've gone, yeah. And then they go off together over there into residential, and then they go and play with it. And then they come back with something that's them, but it's me that's kind of gone, can you hear that? Can you hear that?
Yeah.
That's quite not there. And then I want the band to go and sort it out. Because then, I mean, if they can't, then I start, you know, I will sort of go in a bit more in depth. But I think every time the band can find it, if they're just, you know, if they're shown things that are right under their nose sometimes, they're like, oh yeah, that's not great there, is it? Fuck. Or sometimes bands are going, yeah, kind of always thought that, just thought we'd get away with it. It's like, what?
Yeah, I know.
No, that's not good. That's not good.
You know.
So just on that point then, Matt, what do you think the role of a producer is in this day and age?
To be adored.
To be adored. Well, that's it, guys. Thank you for tuning in. It's been a short podcast. Yeah, and the reason why I ask is because obviously, you know, the way the technology's developed over the years, anyone can make a record, anyone can make a decent sounding record on a laptop. And especially the way that, you know, bands will come to you with demos that they've done themselves. How has that sort of producer role changed maybe in the last 20 years? And like I say, right now, what is the role of a producer for you? And what do you think that developing producers might be lacking or missing out on?
Silenced him.
Yeah, that's a very, very broad question. I mean, there's lots of aspects to look at. The quick fire one on that is obviously the 360 deal came in and changed everything. You know, the internet came in, Spotify, the streaming world, record sales kind of went out the window. You know, every artist really depends on the live sector for their general main source of revenue, which is just why it's so bad right now for so many of my friends, you know, that are literally having their entire livelihoods wiped out. I mean, hopefully the studio will recover. And so the one thing is obviously because records effectively became a loss leader overnight. They're a facility to tour, if you will. You know, they're like a flyer. There's a reason to have music out there so people will go and see you live. So the producer's role, the value became less. There's less money. You know, I remember having a conversation with a producer friend in like a few years ago. He'd been just had a bit of a run. He'd done some Arctic Monkeys and done some Blood Red Shoes and stuff like that. And we'd been working on the Enemy together. And over dinner, he just said, you know, if this was the 80s with our CVs right now, we'd have houses in Malibu, we'd have houses in New York. And do you know what I mean? It's so in that respect, there's a lot less money in the recording side of the industry. And also there's a lot less, so therefore there's a lot less time. So, you know, like in the 90s, it would perfectly be acceptable to go into a studio for 6, 8 months, 12 months to make a record. Now, to make a full album, you've got five weeks on the outside. That's your budget. That's your timeline. So on that front, the role of the producer is, again, you've got to work a lot harder in a more intense fashion and get paid less for it. That's the most obvious difference in terms of the modern times. And the other side of it, in terms of the actual job role, I mean, there's lots of little differences that technology brought in. So, like, for example, sometimes you get sent some pretty shit hot demos that are pretty scary. And they go, yeah, this is just it's a bit rough, but you get the idea and you put it on and just go, okay, shit, you know? So, yeah. And it's an interesting fact, like, you know, when there was a point when you were a kid and you learn to play a guitar in a band, you go to band practice and you play guitar and you learn to look cool, and then you go and do your first gig, and then you just practice it doing gigs, and that's how you do it. Now, you want to be a guitarist in a band, it's like, yeah, I'll learn to play guitar, get a guitar amp, I'll go to band practice every Tuesday and Thursday. Oh, and I'll also get a laptop and learn Logic. And that's kind of, again, so as a producer's role, it's interesting. I think you are faced, and it's not always a bad thing, but you are faced with sort of fellow producers in bands a lot more. I mean, there's one particular producer friend of mine who strongly objects to this new generation, and he goes on these rants. It's like, oh, fuck off, right, so what? You want to sing the record, write the record, produce the record, mix the record? Which he's got a point. He's got a point. But it's a new breed of musician, and it's just the times, you know, but and I think as a producer as well, that, you know, for me, as I said earlier on, one of my advantages as a producer is that I can write songs. I do write songs for people, and I've been on stage, I've toured, I've gone in the studio as an artist, I've been in a band, and then obviously owning a studio like this, I run a business. So it's I think everybody in the music industry, including producers, because a lot of producers, you need to sort of be a bit more multifaceted.
I don't, because obviously, like, yeah, you're right that every band now has its own producer and all that kind of stuff, and what you're saying there. But at the same time, like, it's more than just there's the personal side. There's the keeping the band together when it's going through a bad time in the studio that people miss. We talked about Dr. Dre there and stuff before. When you watch him in the studio, he's motivating everybody. He controls that session, and he's making sure that everybody is in the right mindset. You know what I mean? Everyone's feeling encouraged. Everyone's feeling in a good place and stuff like that. And I think a lot of these people that do come through this MacBook generation, which is fine, and we love it because we know how good Tommy is in our band at doing it, and he will progress to be as good in that aspect. But at the same time, he's learning everything from you, and it's kind of like there's being able to say that you're a producer, but then you will never really know until you've got a controller session like you do with us, basically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't think I would ever consider myself a producer until somebody else called me one.
Yeah, no, you're quite. I do think you're quite modest. I didn't know what a producer was until we started our sessions, because then I was kind of like we were having discussions about it, because I don't think we really knew, did we, Ryan? And it's kind of like there was just that you bring a magic to, because it gets stressful in the studio and you're trying to come up with new ideas and you're trying to it's so intense in thought and stuff like that, because you're focused all day on making the best thing for getting the value for your money, because you're paying for the time there and stuff like that. You've got all this worry: is it working? Are we going in the right direction? What you've added to us was just that kind of calming influence, those moments of insight, like I said, that was kind of just made it like it was like a pleasure coming to your studio. It's like I say, it's like a learning experience for us. So
but
does that make sense?
Yeah, but it worked between us. We had
yeah
a relationship, and I think, you know, there's been certain bands I've worked with that they fucking hated me. And for whatever reason, they're just like, oh, okay. And I think when you, as a producer, I think it's important that you've got to stay in work, and it's very difficult to be choosy sometimes. You know, I'm dead lucky. I'm dead lucky that I get to work with just stuff that I really love. And I think you need to try and stay to that rule, because especially as there's so much work asked of you, and to do it right, it requires so much drive and passion. So you have to love it, otherwise you kind of probably won't do it properly. And I think that's a key to it. That is definitely a key to it.
Have you ever heard of stories whereby somebody's aspired to be a producer and got the technical skills and credentials for that, and then got, say, the first gig as a producer and ended up in a difficult place and completely regretted everything?
Look at his eyes light up. He's got about 80 of them lined up.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm kind of getting at with why I think you're so good at producing, Matt, is that you've got this amazing human element to everything. Like, you can pick up on certain things. You know when somebody's tired. You know when we shouldn't be doing this right now. And I see a lot of technically amazing producers coming through. And I just wondered how you acquire and those skill, that sort of human skill and intuition in the studio.
Partly an Irish mother. And then just you know how I bore you with my stories, just hours and hours and hours of studio time. You know, being on my very first T-Boy session when I was like 17, I guess. So yeah, to now, and you know, I still, like, when there are other producers in here, I still come in and sneak in sometimes and kind of sit on the couch and just spend an hour just sucking it up.
Wow.
And they're producers that I really respect, but they operate the room completely different to me. And I always sort of go, oh yeah, okay.
Is that not really surreal to watch someone come into your domain and do something completely different?
No, but I tell you what I did realise, was it is it with you guys that Dan Austin popped in?
Yeah, Dan popped in.
Yeah.
Adrian as well.
Adrian was there as well. Adrian
Oh
was there.
God, yeah. And then just for those two to be in the room when I work, I just, because I have so much respect for them both, and and I sort of revere them so much, and I'm just like, oh my God, they're in the. That's quite daunting. I like going in the room when they're in there, because I just go, oh, so what are you doing there? What are you doing there? How are you doing that?
Constantly learning. Like, is that still the case?
Oh yeah. And that's the one thing about being in this game, full stop, being a producer. You don't stop. You just want to keep going, and you're just chasing this, whatever it is. It's a daft thing, but it's this so-called being the best producer in the world, and it's not. It's really weird. It's not really an ego thing. It's just wanting to just chase this ultimate creation. You know, that feeling when you finish a record and it's all done. It's such an emotional thing, and the very first day it's out, and you know, you just stream it to yourself or something on Spotify. It's so difficult to explain, and I've tried to explain it to friends that aren't in the industry at all, and it's so weird. It's such a huge relevant emotion.
Yeah, it really is.
And like a relationship emotion. It is like a child. So when you go through this so many times over the years, and you're always learning, then you just start, you know, you just start getting these experiences. And then the other thing is, you realize really that, as a phrase I've often used, every single band is different, but exactly the same.
Wow, man, that's great. That's great. I think personally, like, that's a lovely way to end this first one for me. It's like we've kind of gone in a full circle then, but that was lovely. Like, because you struck on there. There's that feeling that you can't explain. For me, making a record together with yourself and obviously with Ryan will say the same thing and stuff like that. It's just been a pleasure from the start to finish, and obviously we know we've got plans for what's happening next. We know, I mean, the record hasn't even come out yet, so there's a start.
Yeah, and we keep making music together in the studio, and the band is becoming more of an animal. It's as time, again, it's like the experience thing. It's getting to know itself more, and becoming a more, you know, a tangible thing. And the songs are getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And it's exciting. I mean, this year is exciting. This autumn is going to be like properly. The Shaolin Lion will be pouncing on the world.
Absolutely.
Get your head up, Shaolin.
Absolutely.
But yeah, like, obviously we're going to do more of these, because there's so many stories that the world needs to hear that we've heard, and we've not even touched the surface here, because we know, don't we, Ryan? We know what's coming. But like, as an introduction, like, I found that very inspiring, Matt, and stuff like that. And hopefully for other people, they will just kind of a knowledge into the industry, this side of the industry, that I don't think a lot of people get to see. So, like, thank you very much, man, for that.
My absolute pleasure.
Really appreciate it. Can't wait to do some more.
No, it'd be
happy,
good.
Ryan?
Yeah, happy. I think, yeah, a great way to introduce such a big piece of the band to the people. And yeah, I think people can probably recognise already just how important it is to find someone like Matt, if you're in a band, having that Shaolin master to lean on. So yeah, I really appreciate it, Matt. Did you enjoy it, Matt? Are you want to do some more of these with us?
Yeah, this is fun. It's just like sort of sat out in the pub, just nattering.
It is, man. It is very, very much like that. But I think people get stuff from it. I hope so, anyway, because, you know, we're useless to that at this at the minute. But it's kind of like something we've always wanted to do. So
we're just nattering, aren't we?
I love stories. I love watching people chat and stuff. And
I hope I'm just not boring.
You are really boring like that. We'll be cutting half of that out. But no, thanks very much, Matt. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.